So, last time we recorded, it was Mary and I, and we were getting ready to go our separate ways. So when we got to Cusco, Mary took off. I stayed in Cusco for a day, and that night I took the most windy bus ride of my life to Nazca. It was pretty exhausting. I didn't really get any sleep. So when I got there, I didn't plan on doing anything the first day. I had like 4 days in Nazca. So I didn't plan on doing anything the first day. I was just going to plan, look around, book some tours for the next few days. But I found a tour agency, and he said he had a tour going to an archaeological site called Kawachi that I really wanted to see. It was a dune buggy ride. So I hadn't had any sleep, and I got in a dune buggy around lunchtime, and they took us out into the desert. It's one of the most dry deserts, definitely in the Americas. And Kawachi is a series of pyramids. It's a religious site made out of adobe, and it was really, really impressive. The Nazca, for being that far into the desert and in that dry a climate, to be able to construct such a massive complex. Only about 3 pyramids are excavated, but I believe there's at least a couple dozen that haven't been excavated. So it's a really massive site. So after seeing Kawachi, we got back in the dune buggy and we continued out in the desert. I started looking around. We're in this 4-wheel vehicle in the middle of the desert, driving through the dirt, and I start seeing a lot of bones around. And then we stop and we get out, and there's just a small pile of bones and cotton. And what it was the remains of a mummy. The Nazca would mummify their dead, and they would take out their organs, stuff them with cotton, and bury them. This particular mummy was not buried. They'd sometimes just leave their dead out in the desert. And the sun and the arid climate has preserved them for hundreds and hundreds of years. So that was the end of the dune buggy archaeological historical section, and then we started driving out into the desert. And I got the feeling that the guy who ran the dune buggy, he was interested in the archaeology, but he had way more fun doing the next section, where we scaled the dunes. There's, I believe, one of the largest sand dunes in the world is actually in Nazca, Cerro Blanco. And we scaled the dunes, not that one, some smaller dunes. And he asked if everyone was ready, and then he just peeled off down these dunes. And it was basically like being on a roller coaster without tracks. The speed that you can go down, it felt pretty unsafe, but I'm sure he knows what he's doing. Finally, we stopped with a face full of sand and dust. Got out and looked around the dunes for a while, and then he got out the sandboards. And some of the people we were with, they were pretty ambitious. They were standing up on the sandboards, and they're pretty quick. And some of the more ambitious people were standing up on them, strapping their feet in, and using them like snowboards. I was just sitting down because I found that we would just go much faster like that anyway. It was a great ride. You just kind of put your hands in the sand behind you and drag them along to balance yourself out. It was actually really, really fun. So the sun started going down, so we started heading back to town. And after a few minutes of driving, he pulled up onto a hill with the dune buggy, and we sat there for a few minutes just as we watched the sun go down behind the mountains. It was a really, really great first day. Crossing so long, heavy on your shoulders. great first day in Nazca. Despite the fact that I hadn't had any sleep, the dune buggy was amazing, and I was just really genuinely interested in how they lived out there at that point. So on that second day, I had booked a plane ride for early in the morning, so I tried not to eat too much because I don't do terribly well with small planes and my stomach. So I went to the airport, and I get into a small plane. I think it was a Cessna, and we go up into the sky. And if you don't know about the Nazca people, the reason these flights are so popular is the Nazca would clear dirt, the darker soil on top of the desert to expose the lighter soil underneath. And by doing that, they would create these lines, and they would create these figures of animals or people, or sometimes just massive shapes, these trapezoids and lines that would stretch for kilometers into the desert. And everyone had their own theories on what these lines meant. Some people feel that they were pointing to the underground reservoirs because water was so important to the Nazca. Other people felt they were astrological, pointing to stars, certain constellations. But nobody is entirely sure. After the plane ride, my stomach was pretty shaken up. I got like more and more like feverish and sick during the plane ride, but I just kind of kept filming and hope I didn't throw up because there were no vomit bags on that plane. So after the plane ride in the morning, I went and I let my stomach settle, and then I had another tour. Just a small tour in a car. Me and one other guy. We went to a site called Chowchilla. And Chowchilla was their primary cemetery, and it's where they would bury their dead. They would dig these holes, kind of like mausoleums. They would dig these holes in the desert and put their dead in there, their mummified relatives. They would always face east, to face the rising sun, to kind of symbolize a new rebirth. And they would put their dead in these holes and cover them just with wood planks, but the wood planks have eroded over time, and now their dead are just out in the open. But because of the arid climate, they've been preserved amazingly for hundreds and hundreds of years. And the Nazca, their clothes still remain, some of their skin still remains. And when you start looking at their skin, you could see tattoos on some of them. They would have these really interesting tattoos and extremely long hair. They had these long, almost dreadlocks that would just wrap around the skeleton at the bottom. They'd be like 2 meters long and wrap around the bottom. A really aesthetically interesting people. So that was really kind of eerie. Yeah. After Chowchilla, that was pretty much the end of day 2. Day 3, I had one more tour to go to see the main aqueducts that the Nazca built. The main aqueducts that have been excavated. And so I went to see them, and it was really interesting. They still use these aqueducts today. This is still how they get their water for their crops and things, are from these ancient Nazca aqueducts. And they would build these spiral kind of walkways down to the water level, kind of like manholes, so they could go down and do maintenance. So that was interesting. So the guy who took me to the aqueducts, I asked him if he did tours to Maria Reich's house. Maria Reich was a mathematician who moved to Nazca in the earlier 1900s, and did a lot of sketches and came up with a lot of theories about the Nazca lines. So they have a lot of respect for Maria Reich, bringing attention to the lines and preserving their heritage. And afterward, on the way back, we stopped at the miradors, the lookout points. There's a watchtower where you can look out over 2 of the Nazca lines. One is called the Manos hands. It's a figure with 2 hands. One has 5 fingers, one has 4. Nobody's sure what the significance is, but also the monkey figure, I believe, in the desert, one of his hands has 5 fingers, one has 4. So nobody's entirely sure what that symbolizes. The other figure you can see from the watchtower is the tree. And afterward, we went back to town. Day 4 was my last day there. I didn't plan anything to do that day. I had seen most of what I wanted to see, but I had heard about a museum in town. So I found the museum. I went there, and it was a great museum. A lot of Nazca artifacts, a lot of tools, a lot of weapons, and some really interesting Nazca skulls. Turns out they would actually drill holes in the skulls to put a rope through, so they could carry the heads around. I believe as trophies. So they would carry trophy heads, and they had a lot of the heads, skulls still there with the holes in them. Some of them with the rope still in them, and you could also see some cranial deformations. They would strap boards and things to the head, so that when they were growing, it would misshape their head, and that was fashion in a few cultures. In that area. So that was a really great museum, and then I took off. Waited for the bus. Took the long windy bus all the way back to Cusco. In Cusco, I met back up with Mary, and we went to Ollantaytambo, the small town where she had been living for the last year before we did this trip. And I saw some people there who I knew, and we had a great time. The next day, I went back to Cusco. I flew out through Lima, through Dallas, back to Nashville. And it's always, I don't know, it's always sad ending a trip. I was extremely exhausted, but yeah, it's always sad, after seeing everything we'd seen and doing everything we'd done. But I always assume that I'll go on another trip, and so far it's always been true. I've always gone back on another trip somewhere else in the world, or I'll go back and see things that I didn't see before. It was sad, but it felt nice to get home. So I got home, got a haircut, clearly, and Mary will be coming back to the country in a week or two. And yeah. So now I just need to get a job and start thinking about where I'll go next. Maybe Thailand. Yeah. It was a hell of a trip. until next time.